fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasion on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such disillusions to cause others to be elected, whether by the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for the purpose of obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving the assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial, for punishment from any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example to fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous of ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constructed our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their own hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an indistinguishable destruction of all ages sexes and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress of the most humble terms. A repeated petition have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, whose character is thus marked by every act which much may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connection and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. Enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies of and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that is the Declaration of Independence. That is what Thomas Jefferson, in his genius, wrote. And you know, the British Empire, the British government, the British king, did so many horrible things against us that, you know, this country has so long forgotten, because most of our generation has been born in freedom. We've always been free. We've never had to fight for freedom. We don't realize that if you go back and a lot of the things that I just read, about the Declaration of Independence, if you go back and you really read our Bill of Rights, there's a reason we have the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment, and probably arguably most, importantly, the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is to make sure that if we ever have to fight against a tyrannical government ever again, we will have the means to do so. Because remember that the Revolutionary War started not because of taxes, but because the British government, the British soldiers, were coming to take the guns from the American colonists. And of course, there we get the first battle, the shot heard around the world of the militia that stood up against the British military in Lexington and Concord. And they were stopping the British from coming and taking their guns. And unfortunately, that's something that a lot of Americans have forgotten now. Now we see a battle to protect and preserve our Second Amendment more than ever. And I think that's very important that we remember on Independence Day, which is a beautiful day for all of us, because it's the first day, the common man and woman has ever been set free. But also remember that it's very, very important that we all stand together to protect our Second Amendment rights, whatever your feelings may be on that. because the Revolutionary War really started because tyrants were coming to take our guns and ammunition. And there's still something we can learn from that today. So it's still important for us to keep our guns, keep our ammunition, and preserve our liberty.